Welcome YouTube, it's Derek again. Today we are going to be talking about the meta analysis for BRO2022 VPremium, as well as actually a bigger event that happened in the world, which is DaiVangasai Indonesia featuring standard VPremium and premium. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to look actually into each of the topping decks and mostly into the premium side, because I think a lot of people would like to see what premium's all about. And obviously coming off last week for BRO2022 premium as well, I think a lot of people are in that mind space or that headspace at the moment that really wants to see what premium's like. But also it's not only that, because we're talking about the JP format. So we're going to be looking at the forecast of what Clan Collection 5 and 6 will do and what impact it already has in the JP, I guess, meta scene. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that and then just kind of discussing through the decks as well. And if you guys need any coaching for BCS, feel free to hit me up on metafy.gg/@Derek-Dal. My link is in the bottom right hand corner. Feel free to hit me up. BCS season is coming up very, very soon. We'll be starting in September, so make sure you get in a booking session right now before it all fills up. So starting off will be BRO2022 VPremium. So the first region was AO, and the most surprising thing is that we don't see many Gurgits at all. We only see 2 Gurgits, and then just pretty much a splash of everything else. So you have 2 Gurgits there, 2 Bermudas, one of them being Ange Highlander and a pure Ange, 1 Tharvas, 1 Night Rose, 1 Vanquisher, 1 Raging Form Dragon. So I think one thing that is really definitive is that a lot of these decks hit hard and hit hard quick. So I think when you're playing Gurgit, especially if you're going second, you don't have that much of an impactful, ride up turn unless you like draw Percivals and then, your superior calls get like +10. But otherwise you really have that little window from, riding up and then the second ride, where if you take a lot of damage or if you get beaten down before you even reach that second ride, then it's actually pretty impactful to Gurgit players. I did play a lot of Gurgits over the weekend. I think I played 3 in AO, 2 in EU, and I think only 1 in NA, which is really, really surprising. I actually played a lot more Bermudas, which is quite interesting too, because obviously with the ban of Prism we get to see a lot of different variation of decks. So I think the meta at the moment is all about going fast, going quick, making sure that you aggro decks out, and that's pretty much how you play, and which is probably why we don't see many Gurgits. So yeah, going into the top 4, Stephen Lee, my boy from WCC, is an absolute beast, taking first place last week, well, 2 weeks ago in Premium, and then taking first place here in VPremium AO. He is at the moment the AO King. First place with Tharvas, second place was Gecko State, which was Adrian Barber with Ange, and this is pure Ange. And then third place was Kelly Biance with Ange Highlander, and then fourth was Lee SK with Gurgit. So just peeking into the decks now. So Steven's deck, playing Tharvas with no Adelaides. And I think one of the things that he told me was that he ended up using Terrific Coil Dragon as something that you can aggro with early, and this is not limited to grade 3. So you can actually put this down, attack for 14 and then 14 again, or if you have an 8k boost it becomes 22 on turn 2. Which I think is really important, especially if you're playing against Gurgit, because you're pretty much like walking into a time bomb, so to say. Because Gurgit kind of ramps up after second ride, especially if they find like their Percivals, and they're pretty much bound to find their Percivals anyways. They have a lot of digging cards like, Gorbadox, your Jeffrey to deck thin. Then the Gurgits, primarily themselves, they just top 5 and call. So I think the inclusion of Terrific Coil is actually pretty good, especially if you're trying to play fast, trying to play a really aggressive meta. So yeah, that really promotes, attacking on turn 2, making sure you're capitalizing on a lot of attacks earlier on. So yeah, otherwise, like, the deck itself is pretty sorted out. You have your Pursuits, your Corals, and other than that, everything else looks pretty good. Second place was Adrian Barber's deck, Gecko State's deck, which is pure Anj. This is a really interesting list, capitalizing on the soul charging from Quail, and then using Nikita to Soul Blast 3, creating big numbers, drawing cards, and then using Anj to bounce them all back, and then call Tira, and then attacking with Tira multiple times. So this deck, very aggro early because you still have the Lisa Lot Aqua package, and then you have Senders to make pretty big columns like 28 with Aquas, 23 with Lisa Lots, and you're just pretty much hitting over damage triggers from turn 2. Very, very good deck, very defensive deck with Ellie as well. And yeah, playing 6 draws, I'm not too sure how I feel about that, especially if you have a really heavy draw engine. But otherwise, this deck is super, super good. Definitely a deck that I will test out. Third place was Kelly Beyonce's deck, Ange Highlander. This deck is different to ones that we'll see later on, opting to run 3 Bettys, but otherwise everything else is pretty much the same, and playing 3 Lisa Lot. I think that's more for the early game. So yeah, this is a pretty cool inclusion. But yeah, other than that, everything else is you know, your traditional Highlander stuff, so which is pretty cool. And then fourth place, you know, your Gurgit deck, your 8 front Gurgit deck, probably the most oppressive deck at the moment. And it doesn't really kind of show itself, especially with the tops that it got over the weekend. But otherwise, this deck is, done, built to do what it's supposed to do. Smack face, double front, thank you very much. So yeah, that was AO. Jumping into EU. Now EU was even more diverse. So you have 2 Bermudas and only 1 golds. Again, where are all these Gurgits, So 1 gold, 1 Raging Form, 1 Astropod, 1 Tharvas, 1 DOTX, and 1 Isabel, which is interesting. And then going to top 4 is, first place is Manlong, my friend from Hong Kong, taking first place with Ange Highlander. Second place was Full Metal Paladin 21 with Raging Form. Third place was Suo again. Man, this guy just doesn't stop topping. Coming third place with Thavas. And then my boy, again, Toby from WCC, coming fourth place with Astro Poets. So yeah, looking into the decks, Manlong actually inspired, was the reason why I played Ange Highlander for VPremium. And I think this deck is actually much better. This deck, I feel that it bricks less than the deck that I played, and I think I kind of spoke to a few people during the tournament, and I just felt like if I had this approach instead, I think this deck would have performed much better. And as you can see, Manlong did really well with this deck, and it just showed that this deck did perform. I do like the 4 Sednas and the 3 Aquas. Being able to filter out all your Anges, going for your Coutiers, just thinning through your deck of 3s is really, really good. And it's just an easy pick, especially if you're searching with Coutier first. It's a free 10k shield, and you just have ways to be able to dig and reutilize this early. And especially if you're trying to dig for your Ange as your main ride, you want to abuse that early game and then bounce everything back to hand afterwards. And then second place was Raging Form. This Raging Form only ran 3 heals, which makes sense. You don't want to heal out of your thresholds like Limit Break 5, Limit Break 4. Otherwise, you just feel bad. But otherwise, everything else is a respected Revenger deck. Third place was Suo's deck. Same thing as what we saw before. And then this one, Astral Poets, faster than Gurgit. And I think it speaks for itself. I think I was playing against this prior to the tournament, and it whacked me in the face, and it was just so hard to guard because, imagine 70k, you're playing 12 crit, you play Force 2, you just feel really, really bad. But even if you play Force 1, then you have to deal with like multiple big numbers, and this deck naturally gets big. And if you're checking, you mill your Valkyrian, you drive check 5, you're pretty much threatened to get hit by a triple crit. So you essentially have 7 checks in your turn, which is absolutely insane. And if you don't have a PG to work with this, or even 2 PGs because it restands, yeah, it just smacks you in the face. You essentially have 2 turns to try kill this deck. Otherwise, you're pretty much doomed. So really, really cool deck. Love to see that, you know, other decks are adapting to the meta at the moment, even though Gurgit is an absolute freak. Playing faster decks just might just be the answer to Gurgit. And then jumping to NA, NA was very different. So half of the distribution was Bermuda. So 2 Ange, 1 Ange Highlander, and 1 Highlander, pure Highlander. And then still 1 Gold Paladin. Where are all the Gurgits? I think all the Gurgits just died in Swiss, right? And then 1 Thabas, 1 Grand Blue, and 1 Dueling Dragon. Shout out to the Dueling Dragon player. I played in the last round. Yeah, this deck is in his words, he told me if I'm doing a meta-analysis on this, I have to say that Dueling Dragon is terrible. So yeah, that's what he left me with. So yeah, Dueling Dragon is terrible, guys, in his words. So I think this deck is pretty good, especially if you're not prepared for it. You lock out rides such as Ange. You lock out rides such as, you know, Gurgit. The only deck that it doesn't kind of bypass is like Lambros, but decks that need to attack the Vanguard for multi-attack really gets hurt by Zambaku. So yeah, that was a pretty interesting pick. And then going into the top 4, Manlong again, absolute beast. This guy is a VPremium god. First place again with his Ange Highlander. The Gumi guy coming second. So this is Y-Bars or Yuan with pure Ange. And then Michael the Titleless with Thabas and Sabri with Night Rose. So we saw Manlong's deck before, so he used the same deck in NA. Second place was Yoan. Yoan playing your, you know, Ange with Ralenkas. This is very similar to the deck that I played, except I played with the Highlander engine. This deck opting to play Ellie's, but yeah, very formidable deck. Obviously, if you play Ellie's, you can't play Coutiers and yeah, so on and so forth. So really cool deck. Third was Chusa made me change this. Thabas. This one isn't running Terrific Coil or Adelaide. So I think like a lot of these people, you know, just didn't have access to Adelaide's or didn't want to play Adelaide. So pretty cool. And then fourth place was Sabri's Night Rose list, playing the one of Ghoul Dragon, which is pretty cool. And then otherwise, the deck itself is very straightforward, nothing super crazy. And yeah, that's pretty much all for BRO2022. So now we'll really get into the interesting stuff, which is DaiVangasai in Indonesia. So thanks Edo for providing us with all this information. He's a really good friend that I met on my Jakarta trip, so shout out to Edo. So this is the distribution for top 8 standards. So 2 Kairis, 1 Barrow, 1 Bruce, 1 Overlord, 1 Bavsagra, 1 PBO, and 1 Gravidia. And then jumping into the top 4, so Bayu Pradipta coming first place with Kairi, and then second place is a well-known name, Ray Wanessa, coming second with Bruce. Andrew Conan, also a very well-known name, coming third with Barra Magnus, and Ravita Bimo with Dragonic Overlord The End, coming fourth place. So looking at the list, this list is Kairi friends opting to run Kinky, and I think the inclusion of Kinky is pretty good. It just makes it so that this deck hits bigger numbers. Whereas if you're playing into a more control meta, then you might want to opt to run Calfee, but I think people have just kind of walked away from Prison, so that might not be, you know, too much of a threat anymore. So maybe changing the Kinky might be the best way. But yeah, definitely a really, really solid deck. I think the only deck that kind of checked it was like Magnolia, so I think Kairi being the next deck up might just be the best deck in format at the moment. And then Ray Wanessa's list, playing the Grade 4 Bruce, playing Marjorie's and Hellblast Full Dive instead of playing Pandemonium Tactics with, you know, the Brainwash Swirlers. So I think a lot of people have just kind of walked away from like all the Diabolos boys on the Grade 2, so like Derek and Leonard and stuff, and then just opting to run the Festival Collection Girl that gains 10k. So yeah, pretty interesting list. Definitely a Bruce list that I will try out. Third is Baron Magnus, your very staple Baron Magnus, count to 13 or 15 or whatever it is. Yeah, count to 15 and win. Still a very, very formidable deck. If it rolls you on grade 3, you just pretty much die. And then fourth place was Overlord with none of the PRs, which is interesting. And yeah, just face deck, restand, check a bunch of times, and yeah, just win. So congratulations to all those players. Now this is where it gets interesting. All right, so this is where Clan Collection 5 and 6 really take into effect and just kind of shows us what decks are good. So Gold Paladin, you know, you still have your Gurguts, your best deck in format, and then jumping to the second lot of distribution is 2 Great Natures. So 2 Leopold Reverse, and then 2 Narakamis, one of them being Eradicators, one of them being Vanquishers, and then 1 Steam Maiden and 1 Neonectar, which is the Gladiolus Dragon, or Gladiolus Dragon, or something dragon. Yeah, really, really cool. And I think it's really interesting to see that, you know, Neonectar, I think the Neonectar came first in Swiss, if I'm not mistaken. So very interesting to see that there. Top 4, first place was a Vanquisher. Second and third were both Gurguts. So Nicholas Wijaya, first place. Jovan Luanto coming second with Gurgut. Alvin Sugianto coming third. And then Fred coming fourth with Eradicators. We don't actually have the second place list because the deck code was invalid. But first place was Book Vanquisher. We've seen this before. Running few birds here and there. This is the third place list playing Gurgut. Yeah, very straightforward. A mix of crits, which is interesting, not playing full fronts. And then the fourth place list was Eradicators. We definitely see a lot of Eradicators pop it up in Premium, but to see it in VPremium is quite interesting. I guess if you mix it with like EDD, then it can kind of copy the effect below, which is really cool. But yeah, very cool to see Eradicators kind of splash into the VPremium metagame. There are actually some other lists as well. So we're going to look at the Neonectar list, and I think a lot of people would love to see this list. This list is, whew, I gotta say, it's a very pretty deck. This dragon's art actually looks really cool. When I saw this art, it was pretty eye-popping, let's just say. But yeah, this deck looks like it runs like 2 different ride lines and then just smashing it together. So you play the Arboros ride line, and then you play the Gladiolus Dragon ride line, and then you just put like a bunch of plant tokens and then just aggro early. Pretty interesting. Yeah, I can't really say much on this deck because I haven't really tested this deck, but it looks very interesting. Definitely something I will pick up and just, you know, play around. All right, so the most interesting bit is Premium, and I know everybody is, I guess, looking forward to this meta, whether that's sarcasm or not. The return of Ripples. So top 8 Premium for DaiVangasai Indonesia. 2 Aquaforce, which were both Ripples, 1 Genesis being Regalia, 1 Narakami being Eradicators, 1 NLK, 1 Rising, 1 Mystery Flare Dragon, and 1 Deleters. Top 4. First was Mystery Flare Dragon by M. Yusuf Saifullah. And then second was Edo himself coming with Regalia. And then Matthew Lee third with Ripples, and then Wirab himself coming 4th place with Ripple. So looking at the list, I think this is a very close list to the one that topped in BRO. Obviously, we don't have this PR yet. This will come out for BCS. But yeah, otherwise, this deck I think is a very, very good deck. Having double extra turn is actually pretty much auto win. Especially if, you know, your opponent hits OT and then just shuts down your turn, but it doesn't matter because you just lapse a turn and then the OT comes off. So I think this is a really, really good deck, and could be potentially problematic later on, especially with the interaction of how the end of turn skills work. But yeah, whether or not that is foreseen or not, we probably didn't foresee this. But yeah, I think this is one of the most, let's just say high roll, but also consistent decks. And putting both of those words in the same sentence is a little bit weird. So yeah, let's just leave it at that. Second place, your traditional Regalia list, multiple crits, you know, smack to the face, running the Cray Elemental over trigger so that they don't deck out. And yeah, just, you know, your Regalia list that you've seen ever since the start of BSF. And then third place, this is where we get to see the Ripple stuff. So this ran Valios with Revan. So the inclusion of one Revan, I guess I kind of understand. You ride the Revan, you rest something, and then you Odysseus into like Genovius, and then your opponent's like neg 5k or something. Running damage exploders, Bilba, which is interesting. Otherwise, yeah, just your typical Aqua Force G-Zone that you probably won't ever need anyways. And then playing Valios to lock out power. So yeah, that was the third place list, and this is Werab's Ripple list. And I don't know what the hell's going on here. Like, 3 Revan? Wow. And playing the Ripple line? And then playing one of this Neonectar plant token thing? And then, yeah, I don't know. Maybe, I think the idea is like, you Odysseus early, right? And then you filter out all your Ripple ones. You do the same on like grade 2. You ride Revan. You like rest, give a like neg power if you're riding up first. And then you just like superior ride into Genovius and then, yeah, just bash right. So yeah, really interesting list. Yeah, would never have thought of that. Definitely not the Revan, that's for sure. Pretty interesting. And then we get to see the other 4 lists that didn't make top 4. So this is Eradicators playing Steve. So pretty interesting, the 2 Steves. Whether or not that's impactful, I'm not too sure. Also runs the jump engine for Dragonic Descendant. Pretty interesting. I think the jump engine is quite high roll, but then I guess you're going to like exterminate and just get like a bunch of power while your opponent's on grade 1 or grade 2. Grade 2, I think. So yeah, interesting deck. And then NLK, I think this deck is very close to solved. This is a very close list to the one that topped in BRO. So yeah, this deck I think is very close to being solved. And then Rising, so Rising Dudley with like the fullbacks. This deck I think is very close to being solved as well. Just optimizing to use Galley. Galley is a really insane stride. Probably the best stride that any clan would have gotten from P Clan Collection. And then the last deck is the Deleter deck. Now, unfortunately, we can't play this deck. We don't have this yet, but this will come out for BCS, so that'd be pretty cool. But yeah, getting the opportunity to kind of play this deck, slow down the game with Freeze Ray to kind of cut attacks from any aggro deck, and then going into this to ride, you know, delete your opponent's Vanguard, and then striding into like the new stride. Very, very cool. I think it's a very creative deck. Really would have wished to see this a little bit later on in the tournament. But yeah, very, very cool list. And yeah, that's pretty much it. There's been a lot of rambling on. I think there's a lot to kind of take away from this. As much as, you know, we like to see a lot of the BRO stuff, I think the DaiVangasai part is probably the most important, especially if you're going into the next format. So yeah, that's pretty much it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, pop me a like, comment down below what you guys think about everything that topped over the past weekend. And if you haven't done so, click subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you guys soon in the next video. Peace.